Stop what you are doing, because what just happened in the last 48 hours could start a war that drags in every major power on this planet. The United States has handed Iran a document, 14 points, 1 page, and a deadline that expires in 48 hours. Inside that document, demands so extreme that Iranian officials are calling them impossible to accept. But here's what nobody is saying out loud. If Iran says no, the bombers are already in position, the warships are already in the Gulf, and Washington has already told its allies, be ready. Think about what that means for a moment. The most powerful military on Earth, engines running, waiting for one word from the Oval Office, one document, 2 choices, and a clock that is ticking right now. This is the moment that changes everything. Stay with us. Welcome back. This channel covers global military and geopolitical events as they happen, with verified facts, not clickbait. If you are new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We have been following this Iran crisis closely for months, and what is unfolding right now is moving faster than anything we have seen before. Even seasoned diplomats are struggling to keep up with developments that are changing hour by hour, because what is happening between the United States and Iran right now is one of the most significant geopolitical moments of the last decade. Let's get into it. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to February 2025. President Trump signed a presidential memorandum imposing what his administration called maximum pressure on Iran. The goal was clear: end Iran's nuclear program, stop its ballistic missile development, and cut off funding to proxy groups across the region. At the same time, Trump sent a personal letter to Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, opening the door for direct negotiations. Iran agreed to talk. On April 12, 2025, the first round of high-level talks was held in Muscat, Oman, led by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The discussions were described as constructive. A second round followed in Rome, a third in Oman again, but each round ended the same way, both sides walking away without a signed agreement. The gap between Washington's demands and Tehran's red lines was simply too wide to bridge through words alone. The diplomatic smiles were hiding a crisis that was getting worse by the week, but behind the diplomatic language, a deeper crisis was building. Nuclear negotiations between Iran and the United States broke down in June 2025. On June 13th, Israel launched an attack that targeted military sites, nuclear facilities, and regime infrastructure in Iran, and that attack changed everything. After the June strikes, the world assumed the crisis was over. It was not. It was just beginning. Iran retaliated by restricting shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which roughly 1/5 of the world's oil travels every single day. In response to the initial US and Israeli strikes, the Iranian military began threatening commercial vessels from non-allied countries against transiting the waterway. The global economy felt it immediately. Oil prices spiked, shipping costs exploded. In Tokyo, Seoul, and New Delhi, governments held emergency economic meetings. In London and Frankfurt, stock markets dropped sharply. Because the Strait of Hormuz is not just a Middle Eastern problem, it is a global pressure point, and Iran had just pressed it hard. The United States responded by imposing a full naval blockade on Iranian ports starting April 13th, cutting off one of Iran's last remaining sources of revenue. Now, months into this standoff, both sides are exhausted, and this week, something significant happened. The White House believes it is getting close to an agreement with Iran on a 1-page memorandum of understanding to end the war and set a framework for more detailed nuclear negotiations. The US expects Iranian responses on several key points within the next 48 hours. So what exactly is in this document? The MOU consists of 14 points and is being crafted by US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, together with several Iranian officials. The MOU will reportedly include a moratorium on nuclear enrichment by Iran and provide for the shipment of highly enriched uranium stockpiles out of Iran in exchange for Washington lifting some of its sanctions on Tehran and releasing billions in frozen Iranian funds, and both sides lifting restrictions on transit through the Strait of Hormuz. But here is where it gets really serious for Tehran. The US is seeking a moratorium on all uranium enrichment by Iran for at least 12 years, with a provision that would extend the moratorium if Iran were found to have violated it. Iran had proposed just 5 years. The US demanded 20. The current negotiation is landing somewhere between 12 and 15. Iran would commit in the MOU to never seek a nuclear weapon or conduct weaponization-related activities. The parties are also discussing a clause whereby Iran would commit not to operate underground nuclear facilities. And perhaps most humiliating for Tehran, the US has requested that Iran remove its highly enriched uranium, possibly handing it over to the US itself. That is not a negotiation. That is a demand for total nuclear surrender. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio made America's position crystal clear this week, saying Iran could have a civilian nuclear program if that is truly what they want. But, in his words, they are not acting like that is what they want. They are acting like they want a military nuclear program, and that is unacceptable. So how is Iran responding? Publicly, with defiance. Iranian state media says the country has the upper hand, that nuclear disarmament is impossible. Iran's foreign ministry insists the country has rightful and definitive demands that America must accept. But look beneath the surface, and the picture is very different. American officials reportedly believe that Iranian leaders are of two minds, making it difficult to reach an agreement. The Trump administration previously said that the first round of talks collapsed because the Iranian team had to return to Tehran to get approval to sign a deal. Think about that for a moment. Iran's negotiators cannot even agree to a framework without flying back to Tehran to ask for permission. That is not confidence. That is internal division at the highest levels. And that division runs deep. Reports suggest hardliners inside the Revolutionary Guard are openly threatening to sabotage any agreement that touches the nuclear program, while moderate voices around the foreign ministry know the economy simply cannot survive another year of this pressure. Iran is not just divided at the negotiating table, it is at war with itself. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has in recent weeks sought multi-stage negotiations, with a preliminary deal aimed at ending the war first and negotiations on nuclear demands pushed to later. In other words, Iran wants to stop the bleeding first and deal with the nuclear question later, but Washington is not giving them that luxury anymore. Saudi Arabia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed concern over the current military escalation and backed Pakistan's mediation efforts, calling for the Strait of Hormuz to be restored to its pre-February 28th state. Even Iran's regional neighbors are now siding with Washington's core demands. Iran is not just isolated from the West, it is increasingly isolated everywhere. So what happens when Iran's response arrives? There are three realistic scenarios, and each one reshapes the Middle East. Scenario 1. Iran signs the framework. Iran accepts the one-page MOU, the war officially ends, the Strait of Hormuz reopens, sanctions begin to lift. The MOU would declare an end to the war and the start of a 30-day period of negotiations on a detailed agreement to open the strait, limit Iran's nuclear program, and lift US sanctions. Those negotiations could happen in Islamabad or Geneva. But here's the catch. If the negotiations collapse, US forces would be able to restore the blockade or resume military action. So even a signed deal leaves Iran one misstep away from the bombs returning. For ordinary Iranians though, a signed deal means something very different. It means the currency stops collapsing. It means medicine and food imports return to normal. It means their children have a future that is not defined by sanctions and isolation. That is why Iran's moderates are fighting so hard internally to get this deal done. Scenario 2. Iran rejects the deal. Iran refuses, declares the demands an attack on its sovereignty. Trump has already made clear what happens next. He has repeatedly stated he will finish the job, peacefully or otherwise. If a US-led strike goes ahead, its intensity will indicate its intended objective, the collapse of the regime, or a bid to merely force Iran's hand. Israel is watching closely, and Israel is deeply troubled by the idea of a limited strike, with no guarantee it softens Iran's position. This is the scenario nobody wants, but nobody is ruling it out. Scenario 3. Iran stalls again. Iran sends back a partial response, agrees to some points, rejects others, buys more time. This has been Tehran's strategy throughout these negotiations, but Washington's patience is running out. Trump threatened to resume bombing if Iran did not accept the deal. US Defense Secretary Hegseth announced that the US military was getting ready in case the talks fail. Stalling may no longer be an option. The bottom line is this: Iran is facing the most consequential decision in its modern history. Accept a deal that limits its nuclear ambitions for over a decade, or risk a military confrontation with the most powerful military on Earth. There is no good option left for Tehran. That is what no way out actually looks like. The 48-hour clock is ticking right now. Iran's leadership is meeting behind closed doors, reviewing a 14-point document that will define the country's future. Will they sign? Will they refuse? Will they stall one more time? Whatever they decide, the Middle East will not look the same afterward. History does not announce itself. It does not send a warning. It just arrives. And right now, in a room somewhere between Washington and Tehran, history is being decided. The decision made in the next 48 hours will echo across this region for decades decades to come. This is a real moment in history unfolding in real time, and we will be here covering every development as it happens. If this video gave you clarity on what is actually happening, please hit like right now. It helps more people find this channel. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next update on this story. And drop a comment below. Do you think Iran will accept the deal? Or will this escalate into another round of strikes? Until next time, stay informed.